Hello, everybody. Welcome to the DePIN podcast. I'm your host, Tom Trowbridge. We're excited to bring you interviews with the key founders in the DePIN landscape, investors, and ecosystem partners. This is an exciting time for DePIN, and this year we're going to be meeting even more founders learning about the projects that they're building, about the traction they're getting, and about the revenue that they're generating. The podcast is brought to you by Fluence. Fluence is building a decentralized compute platform. It's a project I'm a co-founder of and really excited about. So buckle up for this year. Please subscribe to the channel, listen to us on Spotify or Apple. And of course, if you are around any of the large conferences, come to our DePIN Day where you can meet these founders on the Fluence team in person and hear from all the ecosystem partners as well. So look forward to seeing you in person, and let's get going on this podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the DePIN podcast. I'm your host, Tom Trowbridge. I'm excited here to welcome Stefaan. Welcome, Stefaan. Stefaan is the founder of Akave, which is a key player in the protocol labs and Filecoin ecosystem, and very important in kind of how the decentralized storage system is evolving. So thrilled to have you here, Stefaan. Why don't you dive in right away and tell us about Akave?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me, Tom. Akave is a decentralized data layer, specifically for enterprises and AI data to come on chain. We came out of the Protocol Labs Venture Studio model last year, and so excited to start explain a little bit more about what Akave does. But in general, you could see us as a hot storage DePIN network that is very focused on creating the bridge between what is sort of like the traditional Web2 use cases and the Web3 architectures or Web3 use cases. And so, that's what we're focusing on.
Listen, I think you're sitting in a particularly relevant place to explain some of this more broadly. And so, the key building blocks of anything in this sort of general technology area: storage, compute, and payments, right? Those are the three core building blocks. And PL is with Filecoin, is kind of an early critical player in the storage space. But you think of storage as, you store it, you retrieve it, it's done. But it's far from being that simple, right? And so help us understand the complexity with storage, the difference between from the Web 2, the S3 versus Glacier, the complexity of how things are stored and how they're retrieved, and kind of how you guys are a critical player in that.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, you're right. A lot of people think like, this should be simple, right? I just want to store and retrieve something. But it's a lot of...
Sounds easy.
It's easy, right? Yeah, it's a lot harder than you think, because when you're storing someone's data, you're sort of like stuck. Not stuck, but for a customer's perspective, it's a big decision to like store their assets into any network or any vendor that provides infrastructure, because it's going to stay there for a certain period of time. It's not transactional as some of the other components are, where you just execute something and then you just move on. So what we have seen in history. If you look at 2006, I go back to 2006. This also shows my age, but at the time I was competing against AWS. We were building an object storage system at the time, 2010, kind of very quickly after AWS came out with their object store in 2006. And at the time, most analysts or all of them said, look, enterprises will never move to the cloud. It would be stupid for them to store their data sets in a public cloud or a centralized cloud instead of on premises. And then second to that, they said these new object interfaces are way too difficult. Users will not use it because they're used to file systems. They're used to disk-based systems at the time. And so what you were seeing is that, obviously, fast forward, right? The clouds have sort of like running the infrastructure world right now. But more interestingly, what you saw at the time was in 2010, all these bridges would appear, meaning startups that would kind of create the bridge between file systems and object systems, so that users could just use their existing applications and just point to the cloud through these gateways or through these on-ramps. And these on-ramps would just automatically convert to the file system to an S3 bucket, an S3 object. And fast forward, what happened was users obviously started to like this OpEx model. loved the concept of the ability to scale very easily. And then on top of that, they were able to use their existing applications. So all of these gateways, all of these on-ramps, these startups got all purchased eventually by the big cloud players. Why? Because after a certain point in time, there was enough shift or data gravity that happened that, all those enterprises wanted the same file system plus object interfaces in the cloud. And the reason why I bring this up is because that's where we are today in the Web3 world, where there's a lot more focus on utility. There's a lot more focus on driving actual revenue. And so for us to do that, we have to bring in these traditional customers, but also like more emerging use cases like in AI that are more interested, like more, they're just more open to like looking at alternative compute and alternative storage. And so the first step that we have sort of observed in the last 3 years being at Protocol Labs when building out Filecoin was that you can have the cheapest, most verifiable, most scalable architecture. It doesn't matter if users cannot easily connect their existing applications, right? So it's like this frictionless adoption is hard. And unfortunately, we have to meet the customer where they are, and we have to build the languages that they understand or talk in the languages that they understand. In this case, that means object storage. That also means, more proprietary interfaces like S3. And that really helps users to easily move their assets into a decentralized object slash decentralized storage network that can then upsell other benefits that come out of using blockchain powered storage.
Well, that's really helpful and goes exactly where I want to go. So why would customers move just from first principles to decentralized storage, whether it's a Filecoin, IPFS, or any of the other kind of providers out there? Is it price? Is it redundancy? What do you see?
Yeah. Number one is still price. That's actually still the main driver. And it's interesting, like I would say in the last 2 years, definitely with this new AI wave, we have seen a couple of things happening at the same time. One, there's just a lot more AI workloads that are driving new data sets or generating new data sets that didn't exist before. Two, we're seeing also a shortage in compute, which, has driven up the prices for compute. And so as a result of generating a lot of these new compute workloads, there's also a shortage actually in hard drives. So even as of last month, there's still a shortage in high capacity hard drives. Now, what does that mean? That means that hard drive pricing will go up. This is independent from the tariffs and all that stuff. But the point is, in these large vendors and these in markets where there's a few vendors that control basically the volume and the price, like in hard drives, there's only 3 manufacturers worldwide, which is amazing. You have Western Digital, which I used to work for, which is why I know a lot of this industry. 2, you have Seagate, and Seagate and Western Digital own 40% of the market. And then you have Toshiba, which is more 20%, but really the battle is between Seagate and Western Digital, which means that if those manufacturers didn't accommodate for this increased growth of data that's being generated, automatically the supply is below the actual demand, which is what we're seeing now, which opens up an opportunity for other stacks like decentralized storage stacks to take a piece of that pie. And so what we're seeing is that customers, as a secondary thing that we're seeing is that a lot more customers are also looking at alternative compute resources. And so we are seeing these GPU farms, compute farms pop up. Even some of them are, invested by NVIDIA. Like if you look at CoreWeave, the point I'm trying to make is that these new compute farms provide alternative solutions, just like Fluence, right? Provide an alternative compute solution. To be able to use that, businesses need to move their data to the compute. And so when you move data to the compute, and let's say your data sets are typically stored in the cloud, you have to pay high egress costs. And Amazon in particular charges up to $90 per tip per month. There are some partners that can help you reduce that cost, but still huge amounts of cost. So there's this new trend that I'm seeing is that users are more aware, definitely those that are using their data more often, meaning the ones that have, data sets that they want to monetize, or they want to, experiment with AI, experiment with more advanced analytics. They're also feeling the pain, because when they're negotiating a better deal outside of the cloud, that's great. They can reduce their costs with decentralized compute stacks like Fluence, but at the same time, they're now getting hit with a bill to move that data to those compute. And so what we're seeing is that some of these users want to do a one-time transfer and keep their data in a more neutral data layer or storage stack that doesn't charge for these high egress costs, and allows them to then still move their data around when they need to different locations, whether it's a performance requirement or a compliance requirement, so that they're not really hit with a bill anytime they're actually trying to use it. So the cost is a big element. And in AI, we're also seeing the need for verifiability. And that's more driven by data sovereignty. So meaning, like, how can you ensure that data integrity was maintained, that you're not training an LLM on data sets that are biased, or, this notion of like, they're basically maliciously influenced, these LLMs. So we're seeing some interest there as well, where it's more aligned with like what we can offer with like an on-chain record, because an on-chain record, there's no dispute. It's consensus driven, meaning all the data is on chain, not the data itself, but the cryptographic hashes are on chain. So you can more easily point to a hash and state that, look, this hash has not changed. And as a protocol like Akave, our protocol can guarantee data integrity over time, and can guarantee also where the data is stored, which is also important for compliance purposes. If you need to prove that it's stored within a country and it hasn't left the country, those are all important factors that now are coming up. And so there's a lot of opportunity, but number one is cost. And then number two is more locality, the ability to, compute it more locally where they want it, where we want to compute it, and have the flexibility to move data around.
So it's cost, it's verifiability, and it's locality. Those are sort of verifiability is kind of tied into locality in some senses, but fair enough. On the cost side, if you think just anyone who has read a paper in the past 3 years understands that data, in the past decades, I would say, understands that data generation is only increasing significantly, and then the value of that data goes up, and the process goes up, right? So businesses all over the place, I'm sure, are discovering they're generating more data than they were years ago, and they have to either store it or use it, and that is going to become a much bigger cost than they probably expected years ago. And so when you talk about cost savings, what level of cost savings are you referencing here?
Yeah. Up to 80% is sort of like the defaults that we're seeing. And most of the cost savings is not just coming out of the absolute cost of storing and preserving your data. It's, like you said, it's actually the ability to use your data. So this is where, the egress costs from AWS and Google and Microsoft and others, that's where customers are hit with these high egress costs. And so because we don't have these egress costs, we don't have these high volatile expenses, because the feedback I'm getting from customers, and this is in Web3 as well, actually. So some of the DePIN networks also have very similar enterprise grade requirements, meaning they want their data to be stored across multiple locations and so on, for redundancy. But the point I'm trying to make is that it's super important that the hashes, that the verification is done on an automatic basis. And anyway, so that's what we're seeing. Like, these customers care about that.
And help us understand the driver to the 80% lower sounds great. Does that just taking away margin from AWS, or is there a structural reason that your pricing is so much lower?
Yeah. So AWS has not changed their storage prices for the last 7 to 8 years. So it's been $23 per tip per month for AWS standard. And if you look at the hard drive efficiency hard drives typically provide 15% capacity improvements over like an 18-month time frame. So, not every year there's a new drive, but every year and a half there's a new capacity drive that comes out. And so 15% of those savings go back to the customer, which means that every year and a half you can store 15% more with the same amount of budget that you had the year and a half before. Now, if you know that AWS hasn't changed their pricing in 7 to 8 years, you can calculate very quickly there's already 70 to 80% right there that wasn't passed on to the user. And so that's already a fat margin. Then second to that, there is like an actual artificial egress cost that is super high. And then the third is that, you're seeing different workloads, like some users that we're talking to, they actually, to reduce their cost, move their data into Glacier, right? And Glacier is like very cheap, latency is really high. But anytime you move it between a Glacier tier and an Amazon S3 standard tier, you have to pay for that as well. So now, some of these customers, they're sort of stuck with the data stored, it's preserved, but they can't really utilize it. And so the savings that we're providing come from, one, the fact that there's already a lot of margin that, doesn't have to be there, and you can still build a healthy business today just without any token. If you just provide storage today with full S3 compatibility, obviously that's where, the hardest part is, because you have to really build the same experience, and you use the token and the token networking effects that you can generate with the community to scale your architecture and scale your local presence in a very low cost and efficient way, because there's a lot of providers out there that serve multiple networks that can easily share their networking infrastructure, because that's what they're telling me. I mean, with the Filecoin ecosystem as well, there's a lot of Filecoin storage providers that could run an Akave node on top of their Filecoin system, because we're also tiering off to Filecoin as an archive tier, right? So we're automatically providing that with S3 compatibility and providing them with the ability to tier off to Filecoin. But the point is, what we're doing is we're sharing infrastructure, and because of this networking effect, we can drive lower costs on the egress, and with enough scale, we can make that for free, meaning we don't charge extra for it. And the way to provide a fixed offering to the customers is, instead of giving a low cost, just a low cost and with a very volatile egress. So basically what you can do is you can either charge a flat fee, all you can eat, right? Which is what we're doing, $15 or $14.99 per tip per month. And that means you can have unlimited egress, or you could go down the path of like, I'm charging you $5 to $7 per tip per month, and I charge you an extra couple of bucks for retrieval. It turns out that the customers we're talking to, those are customers typically that are using their data more often. They'd rather have a fixed price. Why? Because they can budget it better, and they'd rather pay a little bit more for that than just paying like the bare minimum and then getting hit with a retrieval bill. And this is where we are. That's how we landed to like the $14.99, because we could offer much cheaper storage, but we also want it to be a healthy, profitable business, independent from even a token being involved.
Really interesting. So then let me understand also, just to make it super clear for people, because are you guys offering storage that is Filecoin or IPFS storage, or is it your own storage, or is it a data layer on top of that enables it? That's the part I think people may not fully understand.
Yeah. It's a good question. So we're basically a hot storage layer on top of in the Filecoin ecosystem that integrates with Filecoin natively. And so what the reason there is that to deliver higher performance and to deliver the same level of redundancy, meaning from a durability perspective, a data durability perspective, and an availability perspective when it comes to the cloud, like the Amazons of the world, you have to we had to build another layer. And so the reason because of that is because you have to distribute data in a different way. So we're using erasure coding to distribute the data across multiple providers, node providers. These are Akave node providers. And because we're distributing across multiple node providers, we can also enforce through staking and through slashing a better behavior that supports 11.9s or even more durability. And also that we can do that because we're not dependent on a single provider. Because if a single provider goes offline, that data can be reconstructed from the data encoding segments that we have on these other providers. And so we can reconstruct it automatically, and we can also drive data movements, meaning we can also move data around in a more flexible way. Because if we want to move it to a different provider, the protocol can take care of that based on obviously a user action. So a user can kind of decide, where's my data stored? How many copies do they need? And by default, it's always a hot copy. And so they can also decide, I want to store an archive copy at a lower cost that can then move to Filecoin. And because we're using proof of data possession and data sampling, we can guarantee data integrity over time because we use content addressable hashes. So a user comes in, they connect through two interfaces. We have an SDK, which is an native object interface SDK. And we have also built an S3 compatible API, which it's essentially a gateway on top of our SDK. And users can then select which one they want to use. They want to use the S3 compatible API, they want to use the native SDK. And then as the data comes in, it gets converted into cryptographic hashes, the SIDs, the Merkle trees, and those get stored on chain. And then the data gets erasure coded, etc. And so I think the big challenge that we have seen in the last 3 years was exactly this, this friction. And so by building these interfaces, it allows users to more easily adopt the benefits of decentralized storage and decentralized compute. Because an example here is we just announced our Snowflake integration. So we are the first decentralized storage layer that's qualified with Snowflake. We're on the website. It took us months to go through this, right? With the Snowflake team. It was driven by a real customer, and the customer wanted to move data out of the cloud with the main reason to be able to leverage external compute. So he wanted to have the flexibility to negotiate better deals with other compute farms or compute technologies and have his storage or his data sets stored in a more neutral storage layer as Akave. And he wanted to connect it natively through his Snowflake application, which is running in the cloud. And so now we're going down the path of integrating with Apache Iceberg. We have requests for ClickHouse. And so it's interesting to see that the use cases that are hurting, or the users that are hurting more, are those that are doing more compute and are more aware of the value of their data, and they're just more willing to take a bet on a new technology or move away out of the cloud because of the painful costs that they've endured. And so I think this is where the market is going to see more adoption, specifically in those new workloads, AI workloads. And I think we need to connect into Web2. Otherwise, it's going to be hard to build everything from the ground up.
Listen, what I think in almost any, I guess I'll take DeFi out of this, but in a lot of crypto sectors, whether it's compute or storage, scale is going to come from onboarding Web2 kind of ecosystems and customers, right? So we get that. And I think if you look in DePIN overall, revenue overall seems to be trending more and more from traditional customers. And I think that, at Fluence, we're starting with more of the blockchain customers and third-party node providers, but they're actually really Web2 businesses serving the Web3 community. So it's a little bit of it's you could debate it either way, but you're in proper Web2 businesses that is actually the revenue generation for the more physical DePIN networks, which that's where scale really comes. So and I think what's interesting also is your background coming from initially from Web 2 and then going to PL gives you some of that insight into it. Maybe just refresh on your background, because I think that's helpful for people to understand as well.
Yeah. I did 2 startups. So originally from Belgium, I did 2 startups in one in data management, which we sold to Veritas at the time in 2005, was using cryptographic hashes to dedupe data in backups. And at the time, MD5, the MD5 algorithm was sort of like hacked. And so we used different combinations of hashes. But the point was, nobody believed it was going to take off. And then 5 years later, it became the standard for backup. Now it's the standard for everything, deduping your data through content addressable hashes. And then I went into another startup that was focused on distributed storage. So we were using erasure coding techniques with consumer grade drives, which are cheaper than enterprise and have a shorter warranty, to deliver a reduced 10x lower cost distributed storage stack that had an object interface. So we would go after life sciences, media and entertainment, any customer that had large files, large data lakes that wanted to reduce their cost versus buying an EMC or an HP or a NetApp system. And so we sold that to Western Digital. This is how I got into Western Digital. Very comfortable with the storage industry. And at Western Digital, I ran eventually, product management and engineering for all the consumer drives. So it was eventually $2 billion. Learned a ton, was fun, but I missed building new technologies. And so when I moved to Protocol Labs, I was head of network growth. So I was managing supply, I was managing accelerator programs, built landing programs with Anchorage, Dharma, CoinList, you name it. Everything you need to do to build an ecosystem. And so it was really fun. And that's also how Akave got born, because we had customers coming to us and said, we love the lower cost, we love decentralization, but can you just give me an S3 interface for now so I can just get started? And that kind of reminded me of what I'd seen, in 2010. And as history typically repeats itself, definitely when you see these, trends of moving to the cloud, moving away from the cloud, I see a lot more opportunity now than I saw 2 years ago because of the AI wave, but also even in a bear market, it's actually a big opportunity, because I've noticed that in the past, if you look at the previous 2 startups, we made the most traction in a bear market. And there was a lot more people that were budget constrained. They had to look at alternative solutions, and they were more willing to take a bet. Because if the market's great and everything's positive, why would you stick your neck out? Why would you risk your
and you're too busy growing. You're focused on the upside, not on protecting kind of the bottom line, because everything is possible. So that, I think, is just the orientation of a lot of companies change.
Sure. Yeah. Totally. I also see a belief system has changed a little bit. I have more conversations where people are actually interested in in the Web2 world, right? That are interested in learning more about how blockchain networks are built and what the value is, what smart contracts can do for them. I didn't see that 2 years ago. And I think it's also maybe the environment that we live in right now, definitely in the US, there's more focus and there's a more crypto forward government in place, and that kind of helps people kind of look at things again, where a year ago, 2 years ago, actually when I started Akave, people were saying, hey, you should move to Europe and set up your company there, because the US is not a positive crypto forward country, and now things have shifted a little bit, and so that's also opening up more conversations. And so that's also an interesting movement that I think is sort of similar to what we've seen, with any emerging technology to come online. It's the legal framework is allowing us to have more conversations. Also, the stable coins are picking up. And, I've actually talked to some enterprises that were like, hey, Stefaan, should I should I invest in a stable coin? Should I put them on my assets? What about Bitcoin? I was like, whoa, I'm not the special. I mean, I know a lot about this space, but I'm not a financial advisory here because I work in Web3. But I didn't see that like even a year ago.
Well, what's also, I think, relevant for what you're doing, which is, I think, I also sort of pull it out to DePIN overall, is your earlier businesses were obviously you had to be in touch with customers and customer focus. You may take that for granted, but that is not the case for a lot of Web3 businesses, which are almost, outside of DePIN tend to have a lot of technology first solutions and figure out a customer and a use case second. But everything in DePIN is very customer focused. It has to be. So that is, clearly your experience and knowledge of working with customers for both of your previous startups and securing customers. You may just take that for granted as obvious, but in our space, there's plenty of protocols been around for years without customers, and so without even securing them. So that is, I think that is an important kind of piece here for DePIN and for your project. But moving to that, from when you secure, how do you guys measure scale? Is it data stored? Is it revenue? Is it, which data stored is revenue, I guess, obviously. Is there anything, other metrics, is it number of customers, or is it just dollars, per year in AAR?
Yeah, it's dollars. So if you look at this, I'm glad you bring this up because we've taken a different strategy. And the strategy we've taken is we're going after demand first and supply second. And like we have two subnets. So the way Akave is built is we have the concept of a subnet. The subnet could be implemented to support local requirements like geofencing requirements. So let's say if someone in Thailand wants to run an Akave subnet, they could do that. They can ensure the data stays within the country, and then they also bring their own hardware providers if they want to. The point is, we have two subnets today. So we have a testnet subnet that we use for testing. So anyone can go to our website, they can play around with the testnet. And then we have a second subnet that we are using to onboard enterprise customers that we control. Yes, it's permissioned. We start as a permission subnet, but it's all built on chain, meaning this, we have 128 nodes. I mean, all of this is fully decentralized when it comes to the stack, the software stack. And then over time, we kind of expand it. But the point is, we want to create a blueprint first that drives real revenue that we can then use as the blueprint for any other subnet to join our ecosystem and our network, and have them basically run a full services stack on top of the network, maybe in regions that we don't support, or regions where we're not present. But our approach is go out to demand first, onboard real customers, hence, the Snowflake integration and other integrations that are coming down the road, because then we can prove the business model a lot easier, and it's a lot easier to scale because it's we've seen it with Filecoin. It's hard, right? You bring the supply and you kind of build it in the Wacom strategy. It doesn't always work. You really need to make it very easy, and you can kind of demonstrate how it's done before these Web2 customers will actually come online. So number one is revenue. And that's what we're driving towards. So that means also engaging, like you said, with some of these, most of them are Web2 customers, but we also see other DePIN networks that are collecting rich data sets at the edge, like a 375 AI, and others that also are interested in collaborating because they need a data layer that, easily tracks data across, the compute, their edge nodes and the core data center. And so they're also looking for enterprise grade functionality. And it's kind of hard sometimes because when I get into conversations on Web 2 versus Web 3, I'm like, let's not look at it that. Let's look at what are the actual requirements. And then let's figure out, are there actually, a DePIN powered network, or are they the traditional Web 2 customer? So, yeah.
Well, then also help us understand scale. So integration with Snowflake, that is a I don't know, 50 billion or some really remarkably sized business, right? So, those are real significant customers using it. So what is success for you? What's achievable? Pick your time frame, 1 year, 5 years, revenue wise. Like, what do you think you're capable of supporting? What are your goals? Just to help people get a sense as to how big this market is.
Yeah. Data analytics is like a $63 billion market or so. It's like growing exponentially. You saw Snowflake, their numbers, if you look at their last financial numbers, they're like, again, out exceeding basically expectations. So from that perspective, there's just the TAM is huge because there's a lot of data sets right now just locked in the cloud. Our goal is to get to 1 million ARR first. That's our first focus. If you look at some of these deals, like a 2 petabyte deal can easily be a 240,000 ARR deal. So these are enterprise customers that take a while to close. That's the only I would say challenge is like it takes a while before this engine starts to roll. But once they come in, you kind of build credibility and you build reference case studies, basically reference case studies, and then you can build on that. So our first focus is 1 million. We can do that easily with our own infrastructure, but to actually scale to hundreds, millions, and billions eventually, we need the network to come in. And so the way we use the networking effects is the concept of a subnet, because what we've seen is to bring more demand to a network, you have to bring in those that are selling to those users today. And who is selling to those users today? Those are the managed service providers. And the managed service providers have a strong relationship with enterprise customers and SMB customers. Or you can look at them as a channel partner, basically. And they're reselling your service if you make it very easy for them to just replace the incumbent, which is the cloud vendors. And you can do some of the qualification for them, and eventually with the ecosystem, then they can more easily sell into existing workloads, in this case Snowflake, and make higher margins. Because if you look at what an MSP gets paid for reselling AWS services, they make 10%, maybe 13% margin. But with a network like Akave, they can make 30 to 60% margin, right? It kind of depends on how much they take on in the stack, because you can be an infrastructure provider, or you can be a subnet owner. And then in that case, you're sort of offering the gateways, you're offering a full S3 kind of experience. So that's really what we're aiming for, is to create networking effects through these managed service providers, through these channel partners that currently just resell existing services out there. And they would be very interested, and we've already have multiple people that are interested in running a subnet once we're ready. And there we're actually seeing more of the emerging markets come in first, because they see it as an opportunity to displace, or actually in some areas, in some regions like Thailand, there is just no infrastructure, or there are no big cloud providers that completely support what some of these use cases are looking for. So that's what we're how we're looking to scale.
And how will a token come into play here? Because you sort of articulated a business model that is token free at this point, it sounds like. So how is a token necessary? How would you think about the architecture there?
Yeah. So the token is important because we have infrastructure providers, and so these infrastructure providers can be providing enterprise grade hardware. Now, to drive the right SLAs, we need them to stake. And if they don't adhere to the SLAs, they get slashed. So just for that alone, we need, because it's allowing us to build the enterprise grade SLAs, which is 11 nines of durability, 3 or 4 nines of availability, kind of, depends on the subnet. That's one. Two, to pay out the storage providers or the infrastructure providers. And even though we are looking at customers that are paying in fiat, and so we're building the payment rails for that. This is one of the reasons why we are looking at denominating that into US dollars, meaning the cost of actually using the network, because the users that we're going after are more looking for consistency. And so, there will be a DAO, or there will be a protocol treasury, a treasury and a protocol that sort of like rebalances what the right amount of tokens are that will get paid out to the infrastructure provider. And so that token, the tokenomics really allows us to scale and allows us to deliver the enterprise SLAs. That's really the main reason for the tokens. And part of the token allocation, we're also looking to use it as a way to incentivize the subnets to come online. So if you look at a subnet owners, they are basically pulling together a smaller portion of the network by bringing in infrastructure providers. They can set sort of like their goals, and they should be incentivized as well. And that can go towards then subsidizing the storage cost as well, even further for those that are offering the services on top of the Akave.
Gotcha. Listen, it ties in a lot of what you're doing. I think we have violent agreement at Fluence on, denominating the price in dollars and paid in tokens. Probably also, rewards, or for you, payments are also maybe in tokens, but also dollar denominated, because your providers clearly have fiat expense levels that they need to meet. So grasp that, certainly, and also stake to enable trust. Same concept as well. So a lot of similar architecture, which is great to see. And the other point, which I think you didn't mention, but I'm going to just sort of make the point for you because I think it's true, is that also somewhat unique to DePIN projects, but not to this subsector. It sounds like you're focused on professional infrastructure providers, not providers in, consumer laptop home things, but more professional providers, which obviously what Fluence has done is obviously how the Filecoin system has evolved to. And we've seen that happen in multiple ecosystems, but it sounds like that's kind of where you start, which I think makes kind of technical challenges easier, makes it more credible from a user or customer perspective as well. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's right. We're bringing on enterprise grade infrastructure providers, and the SLAs, like the slashing, is also going to be enforced to guarantee that. And that's also why Filecoin did such a great job in creating this network of high quality infrastructure providers, because the upside was really high and still is, but the slashing was also very severe if you didn't deliver on the uptime and you didn't deliver on the data integrity checks. And so that's why we come out of the Filecoin ecosystem. It is the right enterprise grade ecosystem in Web3. It's still the largest, and the providers I'm talking to, they love to see these components come together, because all these providers, they have compute, they have networking, so they could run Fluence, they can run Akave, and they can run Filecoin all in the same infrastructure, because the requirements are very similar, the use cases are very aligned. And so that's why we believe there's going to be a lot of opportunity for both of us. I mean, I can see a lot of opportunity for Fluence as well in this ecosystem, to enable the missing pieces, to make more of these workloads actually, come online and make it feasible for the enterprises or the Web2 architectures to replace themselves with a Web3 architecture. Because storage needs compute needs storage. We all need networking. And so that's what I'm hearing over and over again. Like, I've talked to Filecoin providers, and they're like, look, my networking is paid off, my storage is paid off. What I need is demand. What I need is, or I need compute. We're not going after NAS devices at home. We're not going after laptops or desktops. That would be a completely different use case. And it, that's totally fine. I think we could be very complementary with a CDN, for example. And from that perspective, I already see users come in and asking us like, hey, I'm using Cloudflare plus a Wasabi. What is the equivalent in Web3? Can you help me out? So
great. Well, listen, that's I think for those here who haven't read the DePIN token economics report, it sounds like you've read it, or else it is you sort of agree with a lot of the conclusions in there, which I obviously I'm biased to liking. So that's terrific. Good to find that out here real time. Listen, Stefaan, how do people track your progress? If they want to sign up, how do they do it? If they want to participate, what's the best mechanism for people to kind of pay attention and participate in whatever way is possible?
Yeah, you can go to akave.ai. It's our website. We have also a Telegram, Akave Builders. Actually, if you go to akave.ai, you will see the links there. I would monitor the Telegram for builders, because there's a lot of discussions there on like feature requests. We see also smart agents and stuff. It's great. And then second is like sign up for our newsletters on our websites, because that's how we're going to communicate out also more updates on a monthly basis. And then we also have our, of course, Akave Network Twitter handle, or X handle. Sorry, I still say Twitter. So follow us there for any other announcements. And otherwise, just reach us on Telegram.
Awesome. Listen, what you're doing is really important. We need to have hot storage in Web3 and the data growing. A lot of companies would love to save 80%, and whatever that universe is now, it's only going to grow. So look forward to hearing about success and having you back on when you're well past $1 million in ARR. I know it's going to happen soon. Thanks for being on, Stefaan.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for inviting me.
The DePIN Podcast, the place where we explore real-world use cases unlocked by crypto. That's all for today. Thanks for watching to the end. If you enjoyed this episode, please help us grow. Add a like, add a comment. And of course, if you have anyone you think we should be talking to or have on this podcast, either leave a comment there or reach out. But thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.